Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat?
To call Derek Carr's retirement curious might be an understatement. To date, the most extensive piece on Carr's retirement has been penned by Katherine Terrell and Jeremy Fowler over at ESPN.com. It's published if you want to go read it. I spent a good amount of time chopping through this earlier today, and Kat's good enough to spend a couple of minutes with us here. Hey, Kat, thanks for the time. How are you?
Doing great, Matt. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. How many people did you and Jeremy interview for the story?
Wow, that's a good question. Between us, I don't even know. Probably like 8 or 10 people at least.
Okay.
A lot. I'll say it was a lot.
You know, it's good for context to understand, like, this wasn't a single sourced opinion or a couple of people that you talked to. So you got a wide variety of opinions and perspectives. What to you was maybe the most surprising revelation going in based on what you thought and then what you learned?
Well, I will say, just to add context to these types of stories, I think we had 26 pages of notes in this document, which actually could have been more. We tried to turn this around pretty quickly. But, you know, I wrote a timeline of everything that's happened from when Carr got here to when Carr left. And I think the most surprising thing is how many questions are still being refused to answer by both sides. I mean, it's hard to even get a simple answer of when Carr told the Saints he wanted to retire, which should not be this crazy secret, right?
Yeah.
If he wanted to retire, I don't think it matters when he said it, the week he retired, but no one wants to answer that. I guess the other thing is just more clarity on how Carr through his agent, was gauging the interests of other teams before his restructure. I think that's very interesting because it sort of raises more questions to the timeline of the injury.
That's a great point. Let me come to that in a second, but I want to go back. Why, Kat, do you suspect, and you've covered this team and the NFL for a long time, why do you suspect Carr and the Saints don't want to answer the question about the retirement announcement timeline?
My best guess is that I don't think Kell Moore comes off looking great in this piece, just because it seems like either a lot was withheld from him or he chose to take himself out of it. Again, lots of questions still remaining. And so I don't think they want to dive too deeply into the question of who talked to Carr at the end and who Carr told he was retiring, because I think that makes the coach look even more disconnected from this particular situation. But that's just my guess.
Sure, and I think that's important context. I asked you to speculate, but you did note, like, there was it 23 questions? 23 questions that in that press conference last Saturday, when we found out Derek Carr was retiring, the press asked 23 questions to Kell Moore about Derek Carr. And to your point, Kat, when Kell Moore is explaining about how great Derek was through the process, yet they never met, it does call into question how believable Kell Moore's perspective is. So what should we believe, based on all your 26 pages of notes, was Kell Moore's involvement from the time he was hired to now?
Well, I think the one big thing that, to me, puts a lot of people's statements into complete question as to who is lying is that I know that from multiple sources that at least one coach did not know about Derek Carr's shoulder injury. So either Kell Moore didn't tell him or Kell Moore didn't know. There are a lot of things that went on that last week in March. Kell Moore went to a ton of pro days. All the offensive coaches were gone. Supposedly that is when Derek Carr came to the facility, conveniently when Kell Moore wasn't there. And supposedly that's when he found out about the shoulder injury. And yet at least one or more of the coaches didn't learn that information. So, sorry, I'm rambling. I almost forgot what you actually asked me, but I guess that was what I was just so surprised about. is how this communication just seemed lost.
Sure.
In this whole thing.
Kat Terrell's with us, ESPN.com. Get her on Twitter at @Kat_Terrell. She and Jeremy Fowler have a great piece up right now. It's the most extensive piece so far on the Derek Carr retirement. Do you get a sense of how you would classify the Kell Moore Derek Carr relationship? Maybe a better way to ask it, Kat, is part of Derek Carr's decision to retire because Kell Moore is the coach, or maybe not Dennis Allen or the coaches, as you point out in the piece, he had a good relationship with?
I'm not sure if it's so much the fact that it's Kell Moore, but maybe more so that from day one, I think it was kind of obvious that Kell Moore wasn't completely committed to Derek Carr. So even had Derek Carr come back, Derek Carr has been through, I don't even know the exact number off the top of my head, but I think at least 9 offensive coordinators, which is something he's talked about a lot, multiple head coaches. And so, and in his mind, he may have said, why do I want to come back to a coach that doesn't want me long term, a new offensive coordinator, a team that might not be good, only to get cut next year? I mean, this is me again, just trying to figure out what he's thinking, because I don't think their relationship, I'm not going to classify it as good or bad. I'm going to classify it as non-existent. I mean, at that press conference, one of the 23 questions was, did you talk to Derek Carr and basically try to pick his mind about why he's retiring? And he said, well, he talked mostly to Mickey, which I think is a huge thing because you're the head coach. You know, even Dennis Allen flew out to try to go convince Michael Thomas that they needed to be on the same page whenever that was going on. And it's surprising that Kell Moore didn't do that with Derek Carr.
The tell-all from Derek Carr, most definitely at a church in Las Vegas, is going to be fascinating when it happens. You do mention other teams, however, and that's the first we've heard of that. And I don't know, Kat, if you know, was it Carr? Was it his representative that were reaching out to other teams?
I believe it was his representative, and I don't believe it was ever serious talks, but I do think you could infer that if they were reaching out to other teams, maybe they wanted to see what the real level of interest was, and either the Saints said, well, we're out of time, we need to restructure your contract, or there was not any interest, and that spurred everything along. This happened right around the time the Saints restructured the contract. And remember, the player has no say about whether a contract is restructured. Basically, their contract says, we're going to restructure it. You have to sign it, or the contract guarantees could be voided. So they don't get a choice in that.
And it is worth noting, Kat, I mean, it was your one-on-one with Derek Carr after the season where Derek Carr said point blank he would not accept a pay cut, but he would restructure. He would always do whatever to help the team. I mean, that was something he said, and then clearly there's a contradiction now. I do want to go back to the timeline also, which you alluded to, so I'm kind of looping back. But it is interesting if Derek Carr did, in fact, injure the shoulder against the Giants on the leaping play, but was working to come back at the end of the season, and there were even notes that he was throwing, but it was his inability to hold the ball because of his broken wrist. Are we to believe that the injury actually did happen on that leap? Because wouldn't he would have, right, been throwing to get ready to play, presumably at the end of last season?
Yeah, I think that gets complicated because obviously he had an MRI for the hand, right? But if you're MRIing the hand, are you MRIing the full body and seeing what is going on with the shoulder? I don't know, which makes it so tricky to talk about unless you get someone that was in that room, both for that initial x-rays, MRIs with the hand and also the exit physical. I do know that a Saints source said that the shoulder did not come up in the exit physical, or at least no concerns were voiced about the shoulder at the time. And so you would have to think that would at least come up, right? If that was such an issue. But I mean, back in December, it was all about the hand. Nobody's ever, to me or anyone to my knowledge, said anything about the shoulder. And so it definitely makes you, I'm going back, but it makes you start rethinking conversations, just like that conversation I have with Derek Carr in January, the last day, and also that the rest of the reporters had when he said things like, well, I've had positive talks, but, if it had to change, and things like that, like almost like in the back of his head, he was thinking, well, maybe there is a possibility I'm not going to be here in a few months.
Just a couple more. The actual decision to retire and leave $30 million on the table. We've had Scott Shanley on this show earlier this week said he doesn't know many NFL players that would have opted to not have a surgery and forego $30 million. What do you make of this arrangement, Kat, for Derek to retire and leaving that money on the table?
I still find it very strange. It helps the team, honestly. I mean, it saves them a ton of money. And so it makes you question, okay, why would he do that instead of, just sitting on IR the remainder of the season? Now, I've talked to people, not directly involved, that have speculated, well, maybe he didn't want to have the surgery and go through the rehab and sit on IR. Maybe he just wanted to walk away. Could the Saints have forced him to have surgery? I don't think so. So I don't know that it's that. I mean, it just makes you wonder, was there any possibility of this thing going to court and either side being worried that they would lose that case? I mean, because I think it could have gone to court, right, if they had gotten contentious, but instead both sides are saying, I think about each other. So away with money. I guess everyone's happy now, but the truth of all that's going to be very hard to come out because I think only a few people know, and they're going to keep it that way.
Yeah. One more. You said you had 26 pages of notes to do this story. What didn't make it into the story that you think is relevant?
A lot of my notes were focused on the history of the history of teams going after signing bonuses whenever they retire early, and it's very, very rare. Robin Johnson was the rare exception where a very famous player retired and the team made him pay some of that money back. It never happens, and I kind of wanted to know to try to figure out, could this have gone to court? And if so, what would that have been? Because there are ways to void the contract. It says so in the contract language. So a lot of it was about that. And a lot of it, honestly, was just the timeline of Derek Carr's kind of tumultuous history there. I don't think most of that made the story. We all know about it. Just the fights on the field with the teammates, things like that. Obviously the fan base had their opinions about him. I think we just focused it mainly on the last few months, but there's a ton of history you could go into that would have made this a very long story.
Yeah. Why Derek Carr's surprise retirement has prompted questions. The headline, it's at ESPN.com. Jeremy Fowler and Kat Terrell. You can go read it right now. I would highly recommend that you do. Kat, we always appreciate a couple of minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, anytime. Thanks for the shout out.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.